Hello, and we are at the home of Mrs. Agnes Beal Moore, who lives in the town of Red Oak. Mrs. Moore was born in October of 1926 in this very town and in the adjacent house. This town in Nash County was also the home of her grandparents as well as her parents. She first served on the town's Board of Commissioners beginning in 1967. She was mayor of Red Oak for 10 years, and she ended her service to the public as a member of the town's planning board past the age of 90. Mrs. Moore was awarded the prestigious Order of the Longleaf Pine, signed by the Governor of North Carolina and presented by Judge Quentin Sumner. We are here today to hear from Mrs. Moore about her knowledge of the Red Oak Teacherage, located here in the town, which served as a dormitory for female students, female teachers, and later as homes for teachers and their families in apartments, where teachers taught school at Red Oak. In its last years of usage, the teacherage was rented out as apartments to the public. The building was erected in approximately 1914 to support the Red Oak Farm Life School and was in use in some capacity until the early 2000s. So now we're going to have some questions for you, Miss Agnes, that we'd like you to share. And we'd love for you to tell us first about your background here in Red Oak and how your family was familiar with the teacherage and the Red Oak School.
First off, my mother and father both attended the Red Oak School. My mother was a boarding student in the teacherage as well as her sisters, and my siblings and I all went to Red Oak High School and finished there, and have my father and grandfather both served on the Board of Education for Nash County. So my background in education has been of great interest, and I've always been trying to think that the teacherage is a wonderful place to save our history.
Well, and now we know that the teacherage dormitory has been there for a long time and its usage varied, but tell us your first remembrance of it and then what you were told about it from both your mother and your aunt.
My first memories was the building was there and teachers were boarding there. They had a matron who was my great aunt, and I would visit there as a child. Later on, I began, as I grew older and was in high school, I became friends with some of the teachers and would visit them at the teacherage. So I have been in the building a lot as a child and even as a teenager before I left to go to college.
Well, tell us about that Red Oak School that was located just across the street from the teacherage.
Yeah. The one I remember was a wooden building, and I began school, and I think I went to maybe 5th or 6th grades in that. It was a 2-story building, and it burned in the 30s, and then the brick building was built, and which was known as a high school. That's where I finished.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1943.
Okay. And how old were you when you started school?
I must have been 5 or 6, and then you may ask this question later, but we did not have 12 grades then, and I think we had maybe 8 months. It was not like it is now. So I left home and went to college when I was about 16 years old.
Well, from your perspective now, how was school when you were attending? How was that school different maybe for boys than for girls?
Well, I don't know. I can tell you about the girls, but I remember being a rural location and farm related, there were chores in the morning on the farms that boys had to do a lot of times. I could hear them complaining about that before they came to school. That meant they had to get up real early. But other than that, I think the discipline was not the problem that it is now, because we knew that if we did something at school, our parents would know about it. Somebody would let them know. And I lived near enough. I walked to school, and I could walk home for lunch. We didn't have a lunchroom. That happened later.
So when you didn't have a lunchroom and other students who did not live close like you did, how were they fed?
They would bring their own lunch, and of course that varied. And I always thought, I kind of admired some of them's lunch. Maybe I wanted. I've heard of some of the students would trade lunches. You know, that was fun to have something different.
What about, we've seen some photographs, but what are some memories of special events that occurred at the school and maybe even spilled over to the teacherage? Holidays, sports, or any travels that occurred?
Well, I think Red Oak was always known as a place that was big in sports, and they did have some early on state champions. And one of the things that I remember more they don't do now is a May Day, and that was always a special occasion. And I think there's some pictures of that people could see. But I remember my mother, she was big into plants and flowers, and they would decorate the auditorium at school, and when they had a play or something that the students participated in, the community just worked together, and they had a very strong parent-teacher group. I remember going through old things that I've saved, where my mother was a secretary of the PTA, and they kept notes and that sort of thing. So it has always been a community that sort of rallied around the school, and wouldn't have had the Farm Life School if it had not been for maybe people like my grandfather and that school board that he was on. He served in the early 1900s and actually had a heart attack at the school board meeting, but those people were interested in funding the Farm Life School, and that's how I think it all really began.
Right, because the teacherage supported that, because it was so rural, there was no place for teachers to live in the community.
Right.
So we know that at the era you were in school, schools were different. Did you have any visibility into the location of schools for non-white children?
Well, I know there was a school not too far from here, and they had schools all over the county. They were separated, black and white, and at that point when I was in school, there was probably not the confusion or the discussion that there was later on in the early 50s when things changed.
So when this education process began, we all have our special teachers or teachers that we were familiar with. Do you remember any of your teachers living at the teacherage and maybe how they interacted during the day? Could they see their families, or was there a family orientation, or just a single teacher living?
Well, I think that to begin with, they were all single teachers, and then later on, after the apartments were made, there were teacher families that lived there. But sometimes students were allowed to go over there for certain things, and I had a couple of special teachers that I got to know when I was in high school, and we remained friends throughout life. And so actually one of them, I was in her wedding.
That's nice. Why do you think the citizens of Red Oak area staunchly supported education for the community's children for so long? And ways that you saw the parents and maybe the community leaders focus on schools and having the teacherage there with the school teacher families?
Well, like I said, Red Oak was always sports oriented, and they followed those teams all over the state. And that was a big part of it, I think. But we always seemed to have special faculty. I think the county and they tried to have the best possible teachers that they could hire. And Mr. L.S. Insco was principal at the school here at Red Oak at one time, and then later he was superintendent of Nash County Schools. And he inspired a lot of articles about education and things that happened. And I just think it was a community that thought education was important. And recently, my sister found a report card of my mother's from 1913, and she was taught Latin and Greek, so we know it was a good school. And people came and boarded, some in community homes, and went to school here that were not from Nash County.
That's amazing.
And I happened to know some of those people.
Well, here in 2023, we've now lost the Red Oak School that was beloved by the community and served so many students. We've now had consolidations of schools, and the appearance is different. We have a beautiful new elementary school in Red Oak, a middle school here in Red Oak. But there's one thing that remains from those early years, and that is the Teacherage building. From your perspective, why did you think it was important to save it? And give us a little background on how saving that Teacherage building got started.
I'm not sure what year it was. I was reading a paper and I saw the coverage of the town board meeting, and they were talking about getting bids about tearing the building down. So we rallied a bunch of us people that were concerned. We thought it was important as part of our history. And this was the second farm life school in the state of North Carolina, which is certainly part of it. And we did not want to lose that last vestige of the school. So it began, and I think we formed a nonprofit in 2018, something like that. Small group. We've set that nonprofit up, and it has grown, and we are at the point now that we need to involve everyone. Everyone is a part of this history that grew up and went, and I will say they formed an alumni association of the high school back many years ago, and they have been supportive of the school, and I think they're behind this effort too. And let's hope that people will become more interested and contact the committee and offer to help. We need everybody to help step in.
Well, the Red Oak Area Historic Preservation Society is established. It is a nonprofit, and it's because of the work of you and many of those others who initiated. We are blessed that you still serve on the board of directors for that group. And we'll close with some ideas that you personally could think of that would be of good usage for this wonderful old building that is so well appreciated now that it's looking a little more like it used to.
Well, I have always been interested in books and having them available. I took my children to the bookmobile, which I thought was a wonderful thing, but I think if we could have a branch of our main Braswell Library, this would offer an opportunity for more people to have access to books. Also, in my mind, I think the area would benefit from a walk-in medical clinic. We are a large area that, now I grew up with a doctor across the street from my home, so I was used to having a doctor nearby. But now it's a little bit more difficult, and there are other ideas that people have. The building would have to have some way to make money, rent out space to keep the building up. We realize that through contributions from people. We have a window fund that we have started, which you could dedicate to a family member or honor a family member, and that would help with the history. We would be able to put down a little history about this person, and it would be a real thing that people could learn more about their heritage, I think.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate your time. We cherish the knowledge that you have brought to this organization, and we thank you so much for sharing what you did today.
Thank you for this opportunity, and I hope I will be able to help some in the future.
Well, at 96, you've done quite a lot, and we're looking forward as you approach October in 97 that it can continue. Thank you again, Ms. Moore.
Okay.